My name's Leanne Beam. I'm a physiotherapist here in Estevan. I've been treating concussions for about 3.5 years. So I just want to share some information with you about concussions today and answer any questions you have. It is definitely a hot topic. So just want to be there for some support and some guidance. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is what is a concussion, how is it recognized, and when must an athlete sit out? How is it assessed and treated? What is the baseline test and why is it important? What is post-concussion syndrome and can it be treated? We're going to talk a little bit about return to learn and return to play steps. And we work through Complete Concussion Management, the company. So we're a subcontractor, and how are they leading the way in concussion development, concussion management, and kind of what's happening out there, what's the research showing, and where are things going with concussion. So just a little housekeeping on Zoom. So everybody's muted when I talk, but if you wanted to talk, you just have to unmute yourself in the bottom left corner. And how Zoom works, when you talk, you just show up on the screen. So definitely we want to be interactive. If you have any questions, you can either ask that way or there's a chat box too. So we'll be monitoring the chat box. If you have any questions too there, that's a good place to I guess, answer them. And then I'm going to ask some questions too. So I think that's all for housekeeping. So I'm going to just share my presentation right now. So give me 1 second here. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get going here on the 1 second slideshow. Okay. So we're going to talk about just concussions in general to start here. Does anybody have a guess as to the top sports that have concussions? There's been a couple studies that have been done. There was one that was done in the States. Oh, I'm gonna just open. Oh, there we go. Football, hockey. Yeah, those are givens. Any others that you guys can think of? There's 2 studies we're gonna go through. One was done in the States, and one was done, a really recent one from Canada. And the Canadian one is pretty surprising, the ones that are on that list. So the one that was done in the States, the top 9. And these were incidence and prevalence per sport. So the highest concussion rates, we had football number 1. The next one is always surprising when I talk to parents because it's non-contact, but we all know that girls ice hockey is pretty physical, and that's number 2 on the list. And we do see a lot of female ice hockey players through here too for concussions through the season. Boys ice hockey was 3rd. Boys and girls rugby was 4th. Boys lacrosse was 5th. And then we had girls soccer, number 6. 7 was girls lacrosse. 8 was boys soccer, and 9 was boys wrestling. So the recent one that just came out of the CIS, so that's Canadian Inter-University Sport. So that's our university athletes. Surprising, football's not even on the top 5. So I'm not sure if that's just that it wasn't maybe reported, because that's another issue we have with concussions is underreporting. But the list was number 1 was men's rugby, number 2 women's rugby, 3 women's basketball, 4 men's hockey, and 5 women's soccer. And actually one of the worst concussions and one of the longest rehabs that I've worked with was it was basketball too. It can be quite physical also. Other stats just to keep in mind, there was a study that was done with the NCAA, and 5% of athletes, according to trainers, experienced concussions, but when they actually spoke with the players, 50% of them actually reported that they thought they sustained a concussion in that season. So there is a big issue with reporting and just education. Some coaches, trainers, they're not really sure when it is, when it isn't. So we just want to be able to educate just to know when do you sit athletes out, because it's better to sit them out than let them play if you're not sure. So one of the big studies too said about 10 to 15% of athletes are estimated to experience concussions every year while playing contact sports. So it's a pretty high number too. We also see that more concussions do happen during games more than practice, just because a higher level of effort, they work a little harder, it seems, with games. So just some stats that we wanted to share. So I'm gonna go back to my screen here. I'm gonna try to advance my slide. Okay, so when we talk about concussions, we do talk about that there's a problem about underreporting is the big thing, but prevalence, it's a big wide range. 10 to 30% they figure in sport per season do sustain concussions. We think of concussions and just the problems in concussions is more of a concussion management issue. There's a lot of discrepancy between what a coach might say, a trainer, a doctor, the ER department. Depends where you are, you might be told something different. So there's a management issue. The scary thing is that improper management can cause serious consequences, and there are documented causes of long-term brain damage, so traumatic brain injury, and then severe brain injury and fatality. So we'll talk about one of those cases that happened in Canada. Now, healthcare providers aren't trained sufficiently on concussions. Medical schools don't cover it they maybe do an hour, and only about 30% of doctors know the proper management and return to sport protocols. We're still seeing a lot of doctors saying off for 2 weeks, which isn't best practice anymore. I was in physio school back in the early 2000s, and what we learned back then is a lot different than what we know now.
Just chat for 2 minutes. Laura is just getting on right now.
So things are always changing too, and the great thing about concussions being in the media is there's a lot of new stuff coming out all the time, and there's a lot of research happening and a lot of really good things we're learning, and just different protocols that we're learning that are safer for our athletes and our children in sports. So and then just the one thing why you guys are here, coaches, trainers, parents aren't necessarily recognizing concussions. So that's something we want to talk about today too. So just this is one case of an athlete out in Ontario. 2013, her name was Rowan Stringer. She was a rugby player who died after a tackle. So she had a severe brain hemorrhage. She passed away on the field. Doctors tried to relieve the swelling, but they couldn't. And reports confirmed there's evidence, they did a coroner's inquest, and there's evidence that she was hit 2 weeks before, 1 week earlier, was complaining of a headache, but at the time of the injury, she did not have any symptoms. So I just have to add one more person here. Admit. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. So what happened after this coroner's inquest was they enacted Rowan's Law, and that happened this past March. Now that law, it's a three safety rule law, so education for all. So that's for parents, coaches, athletes, trainers, and executives of all sport, whether it's minor, whether it's school sports. Every sport also has to have a remove and return to play policies for their athletes and a code of conduct for concussions. So what tends to happen when there's new health policies, Ontario tends to set the bar, and it'll move east and west. So this likely will come out this way soon. One thing that's interesting too is down in the States, every state has something like this. So it's definitely getting to be the law. I'm just gonna add one more person. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so just understanding concussion. So what is a concussion? So when I went to school, we learned that it was your brain sloshing around in the head, bruising. So your brain was bruising inside the skull. That's been debunked. That is not the cause. Now that they're looking more into research about what's happening structurally, so it's an injury due to acceleration. So think of a really hard whiplash. You don't necessarily have to have contact of the head. Even a strong whiplash is enough just to make the brain move around in there. So if you think of a brain, or think of a bowl of jelly kind of moving around, and it might fissure, right? You might get little cracks in there. So that's kind of what's happening in the brain, but it's not a structural injury. Nothing's getting damaged. What's happening is there's some stretching and shearing of the nerve cells. And when they stretch and shear, they allow certain chemicals through the brain that aren't usually allowed in there. So it affects the blood-brain barrier. It takes some time for that to get back to normal, and that's why people feel pretty yucky the first little bit. And we'll talk about kind of those phases of injury too. So the phases, the first one is this excitation. The brain's going crazy. What we might see is a kid kind of stumble as they're coming off the field. We might see a fencing response, which is pretty scary, where their arms just kind of come up just because their brain's just going kind of haywire. So that happens very, very quickly. And after that, there's a big energy deficit, a big plummet of energy. And that's where we get the fatigue and the headache and the dizziness. So they don't necessarily feel that way early on. That might be later that night, or that might be the next day. So, and it's called a spreading depression. So it's a huge energy deficit in the body. So we'll show you that on this graph here. So the graph has two axes. So the vertical axis is the energy in the brain, and the horizontal axis is time. So when we look at normal resting, there is 100%. Sustain a concussion, you go down, research has shown about 20% of a drop. Okay, and then research also has shown that it takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the brain to get back to those resting energy levels. And then you're back to normal. So what happens? So this line here, this hatch line, 7 to 10 days, is when most athletes feel fine. So when the doctors say, oh, you're off for 2 weeks, typically they feel really good, and then they go back to sport. But what our concern is, between that hatch line to the normal brain energy levels, there's a gap there. We call that the vulnerability period. And that is scary for us, because if something were to happen in that time as they're coming up the slope there, then they could get much, much worse. So let's show you here. So let's say they go back a little early and they sustain another concussion. They drop, they plummet again. So instead of 2 to 4 weeks, we're looking at 3 to 4 months. Most of the athletes we see, they're out the rest of the season. That's basically their season in most sports. So that does happen, unfortunately, but that's what we're trying to educate on. So, you know, these athletes get back in that 2 to 4 weeks and they're healthy. And so now as we look at this other upswing here, so, you know, they might feel better 1 to 2 months, but research has shown it takes about 3 to 4 months to get back to normal resting levels there again. So that's after, we call that second impact syndrome. So they get an impact here, a second one, and they plummet down even further. So what happens if they have another one? They plummet even further down. So then do they ever get back to that normal resting levels? If you think about the media and what's happening in professional sport, that's likely what's happening is, you know, they go back to practice too soon, they go back to sports too soon, and never really get back to this normal energy resting level. So that's what's concerning to us, is, you know, making sure our athletes are out long enough so they get back to this normal resting level, and making sure they don't sustain that second impact. So, and I was reading another stat lately, I think it had said athletes that go back too soon are 8 times more at risk of sustaining a second concussion. So that's something that just came out, another study that we were looking at. So scary. Yeah, so permanent issues. I mean, you hear things in the media about, you know, professional athletes having long-term mental health issues, having chronic headaches, problems that never went away. So that's our concern. That's what we're trying to prevent here, is getting our athletes back in whatever time it takes. Some take a bit longer than that, than those 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, so now this red line's a little scary. There is a line where there's cell death. We don't know exactly where that is for each person, but if you plummet below the cell death line, then you might have permanent symptoms. So something we have to keep in mind. Now, other studies coming out are showing if you get back to this normal resting level, take that 2 to 4 weeks or whatever time it needs, and you sustain another concussion, does not show that you should take any longer to recover. So that's encouraging. Okay, so determining brain recovery. Can you see it on all these tests? MRI, CT scans? No. At this point, there isn't a test, a diagnostic test that will confirm a concussion, but there's a lot of really neat things happening in the research, so that's encouraging. There's blood testing they're looking at. There's another test called DTI where they look at the flow in the brain. So there's things coming down. A blood test would be really great, right? You go and get a blood test, yes or no. But that's, I mean, they're doing a lot of research. Hopefully that'll be coming out soon. They're just looking at different biomarkers and seeing if they show up after concussion. So, but any of your MRI, CT, they won't show, but a lot of times it's not a bad idea if we're seeing symptoms that are concerning and red flags. Yes, they'll get sent for an MRI or CT scan to rule out harmful things like brain bleeds or like a skull fracture, which aren't concussion. That's a traumatic brain injury. So there are times that the doctors will refer on, which is great. You know, there's definitely rules as to when these would be referred on to, and just to clear for the bad stuff. So if those are all clear, then, you know, then it likely is just a concussion. So another test that helps us determine brain recovery is a pre-injury baseline test. So what we do there is we use objective measures just to compare how they are when they're healthy compared to how they are when they're injured. And there is normative data out there, which means there's data for, you know, age and sex, but it's not reliable. So everybody's different. Some of the tests have to do with memory. Some of them have to do with strength, balance. Everyone's going to be different. So the only way we know what your normal is to test you before you get hurt. So that's what we do for the objective measures. Looking at things, there's a list here. So balance, reaction time, cognitive ability, memory, visual processing speed, strength. So our test has 11 different things that we test. And it just lets us know exactly where that athlete is pre-season. And how we use it, it's not, we don't diagnose using a baseline. We use it to determine return to play. The only time we use it at the beginning of an injury is if we're not sure. So sometimes an athlete will come in and the parent will tell us, well, we're not sure what happened. We didn't see a hit. We didn't see any whiplash event. They're just not feeling well, but we're not sure if it's a concussion. So what we would do in that instance is we would test them against their baseline and see if they can pass their baseline. Because if they were dehydrated, they should be fine if they come and see us the next day, and they should be able to pass it no problem. But if they have gone through all of our protocol, which we'll show you what our protocol is like, that's the last test we do to determine if they're ready to play. So if they passed all of our exertion tests, we're gonna put them through their baseline and see if they can pass their baseline. And if they pass each component, then they are cleared to go back to their sport. That's kind of the last little bit of testing we can do just to give us confidence and, you know, saying, yep, you're good to go back to your sport contact. So for us, we feel more tests gives us better results. There's other tests out there. So single test, so the impact is a test that's done on the computer. For that test, you have to be 13 years or older, and it just looks at things like memory, it looks at recall, it looks at concentration, impulse control, and it gives us a really good set of numbers. There's about 7 data points that we look at that, and there are normative scores for the impact, but they're not reliable either. So our best score is the athlete score. That test in itself, I know the SJHL mandated their concussion program, and that's the only test that they're doing. So we've worked with the Bruins for many years, and we've done about 4 years of our protocol with them. So we do the impact as part of the protocol, but they also do all of the other tests that we've done here in the clinic with the complete concussion management. And we've seen a lot of concussions over the years with them, and it's really helped us manage their concussions, I guess, really thoroughly. And we feel really confident when we're ready to get them back to play, whether it's non-contact and contact. So the SCAT3 is another one that you might have seen out there. It's actually a SCAT5 now, so we're gonna have to update that. It gets updated all the time. It's better than nothing. It has some of the tests that we do, but it's missing a bunch also. But it should never, so these tests should never be the sole basis of management decisions. We definitely look at a lot of things in that case. So the baseline testing, it goes through the list here of everything that we do. So I listed some of them, but we do history, symptoms. Symptom score is important too, because some athletes, keep in mind, we're seeing a lot of kids. Some of them have a lot of these symptoms normally. Things like we see a lot of kids that have trouble falling asleep or that have fatigue or low energy, depending on their age. A lot of the younger kids, when we get into concentration and memory, they will give us a score for those too. So it's just good to know what their normal is. If we don't know their normal and then they come in post-injury and they say they have headaches and they've had headaches before, then we're kind of struggling saying, okay, well, compared to your normal self, how are your headaches? So it's a little tough on our end. We try our best, but if we have that baseline score, it just gives us kind of more to go with. Balance is a big thing that we check too, different memory and recall tests. And then that impact test is for the older kids. So when they do that test at home after, we give them about a week to get it done, and then we check the scores because we can actually tell if their scores aren't valid, and then they have to do the test again. So if we have all those tests, it gives us a really good idea of that athlete's baseline. So treatment, there is definitely treatment for concussion. I'd have to say for the younger athletes, a lot of them get through the protocol and they don't need many appointments with us, but there are some, about 30%, that have symptoms longer than 30 days. So we used to call that post-concussion syndrome, and now it's changing to persistent concussion symptoms. So rest is definitely not the best anymore. I mean, that That used to be the case. Now it's just showing early interventions the best, and the best treatment early on is just being active, and we call it symptom limited activity. So doing things that increase your heart rate, just even going for a walk, but if your headache gets worse, you stop. So using that as your symptom threshold. So we definitely encourage activity early on. If we still have clients that have persistent symptoms, we're going to be screening their vision. We're going to be screening, I guess, their vestibular system, which is their balance centers. We're going to be looking at their activity, looking at their neck. And if we feel, we do the screening, and if we feel that they need more care than what we can provide, we're going to refer them on. So we do have a network of other health practitioners. We've got a couple local optometrists we work with. They have the connections with the visual therapists and the neuro optometrists. Vestibular, there's vestibular therapists we can refer on to. We do have basic things we can start with. For the neck, we'll do a lot of the treatment in clinic, us being physios. One more ending, okay. Diet and nutrition, we go based off of the CCMI nutritionists and naturopaths that work with the company, and they have really great information there to help with, anti-inflammatory food, minerals, vitamins, that kind of thing. The exercise therapy, we do a lot of guidance for that too. And then a lot of people just need reassurance and education. Just letting them know, yeah, this is how things go. Don't worry, this is what step we're on. This is where we're going. This is the next step, and just really guiding them back to activity. So we follow a 10-step return to play. It used to be a 7-step, but the one big thing that was missing was getting back to school. So that was always kind of the thought was, well, if you're not back to school, why are you back to your sport? So they actually put in some days here for returning to school or work, because we do see some adults also. So we do it, like I said, a 10-step. So anything in red, they're not playing their sport at all. Anything in yellow, they're playing, but they're non-contact. And then the green, they're back to contact. So each step has a 24-hour window. We used to have 24 hours symptom-free, and this is one thing that's changed in the past about 6 months, is we're actually able now to progress athletes through the stages as long as their symptoms don't get worse with that next stage. So we're able to progress up to about stage 5, and stage 5 is where we get them on the treadmill and we do a test just to check their blood flow. So like I showed before on that graph, how their blood flow is diminished with a concussion, we're just screening to make sure that that's not still an issue. So if they can pass that test, and the pass on that test is just they can get through the test and their symptoms don't get worse, then they're back to their sport. The big reason why we're not waiting for symptoms is it could take 2 weeks for the symptoms to go away, and then they're away from school, and then they're not in their activity, and just causes a lot more mental stress for these athletes and these kids. So, and it's biggest thing is that stage 5, we're looking at blood flow, but a lot of times it's, vision we have to work on. It's the neck we have to work on. So once they clear that stage 5, they're back to their sport, doing kind of a light practice, heavy practice, and then they come back in the clinic just for one more test, and it's an exertion test. So our job is to max their heart rate out, get them working really hard, and also challenge all of the other systems that can be affected by concussion. So we're challenging vision, balance, and the neck through lots of different, it's a graded bike test, doing hills, doing intervals, and then plyometrics. So we're doing hurdles and box jumps and burpees and rotary jumps. So really tough stuff. We have heart rates coming up and down really quick, and we're just making sure that their symptoms don't get brought on by that test. If they can pass that test and we have their baseline, we run them through the baseline right after. And then if they pass that, then they're back to their full contact practice and then back to gameplay. So 24-hour window between those two also. Looking at our stats, our average return to play is about 22 days right now. So that's from injury to full return. So, and that kind of hovers around 20 to 22, it seems. We've been treating, I think we're at 124 concussions now. So, that's kind of our average. We do have some kids that are back in 10. That's probably the quickest we've ever done. And I've had some kids that have taken 80 to 100 days. And those ones they went back to sport too soon. and not really knowing that they should have been sitting out. So even if they go back to sport and didn't get hit, a lot of times that does delay them at least a week or two if they return. When they have that big deficit and they're playing their sport again, using up all that energy, then we find that they take a little more, they're a little more delayed overall. So basically, CCM is who we do all of our training through. So it's basically for healthcare practitioners, medical doctors, just to be certified. The neat thing about it is there's clinics all over Canada and into the States now too. So if you have a child that's playing, what? And Australia is new too. If you have a child playing a sport and they travel a lot, it's great. You know, let's say you're in Saskatoon at a tournament, your child gets a concussion. Well, there's a clinic there that can pull up his file. So when you come through for baselines, you get a card with a code on it, and that's the file number. So it basically follows your child wherever they are, and they can access care in many places throughout Canada. So yeah, we do the baseline testing, we do concussion diagnosis and treatment. And I would say our clinic usually, I think we have a span of at least 1 to 2 hours around Estevan that we bring in, from Oxbow to Carlisle to Weyburn even sends people our way. And then we do see a lot of athletes in Estevan too. We also help with guided return to school, work, and sport. So we do a lot of communication with the teachers. Some kids need to be exempt out of, well, most have to be exempt out of gym unless they are doing something that's not physical, which most of the time that's not the case. Even recess. We've had one poor kid that was just out minding his own business, and you know, kids are roughing around and roughhousing, and he gets a ball in the head, and he's recovering from a concussion, and that was double impact, second impact, and he got definitely regressed, and it took him a while to get back. So sometimes I just keep the younger kids inside for recess. The older kids, sometimes band class I have to pull them from. If they're in high school and they do like welding or shop classes, I might have to give them restrictions for that. Some kids need to have more time for tests and assignments or a quiet room. So there's a whole span of things that we look at. Some need breaks, some need to leave the classroom early to avoid all the traffic and commotion because that brings their symptoms on. So we definitely encourage return to school as soon as we can, but sometimes it has to be part days and work up to full days. So we also don't want the kids to get stressed out because they aren't at school. That doesn't help recovery. So, and the teachers have been really good so far. That's one of our big goals, is to try to get more schools, at least have one teacher each school that understands the process. That's kind of our liaison. So we're working on that this year just to make sure we have that contact point. That would really help us out. But so far, so good. We do an academic accommodation letter, and that seems to be fine so far with the teachers, and it's just good to have that communication with them. And then we have lots of educational resources for everybody that we're able to share. So the really neat thing about CCMI, it's very technologically advanced. There's an app that is free that we can, if you're a coach or a trainer, you can actually get all of your athletes listed on it. They just need to give you permission, and nobody has to go through the clinic with anything to access that. Basically, you can report injuries to us. You can track your athletes, and if your athlete is out and they're working with us, you can see what stage they're at. You can see what sport you're playing and what drills are appropriate for what stage they're at too. An athlete that's injured uses the app with us. We don't do a lot of in-clinic treatment. We actually do a lot through the app where we can track their symptoms every day. They input their symptoms and we can keep an eye on them. They can communicate with us a progress report. Sometimes the kids that live a little further away from here, I'll just say, okay, well, you're going to school tomorrow, and send me a note and let me know how it goes. So I can just go onto our site through our portal, check up on everyone. So that's really handy. And then there's a lot of educational resources that we can share too, and we'll have some things we can send out to you guys too if you're interested. The sideline course is something we really want to plug. That is for anybody. I mean, definitely encouraging coaches and trainers. Basically, you're just going to learn kind of some of the things we learned today, but in more detail. Really looking at like that pulling athletes and just kind of the return to play guidelines. So it is free, and we have a free code. So we'll share that with you guys. Definitely want to have as many people take that we can, just to spread the word. And then the app we went through. So basically how the app works is, you know, let's say you take the concussion sideline course, you get the app on your phone. Now we have the baseline test that goes to the phone too. You guys can communicate with us. So, you know, it's just a really swift way of keeping everyone on the same page. And that's what the app looks like if you have your athletes listed. So athletes in green have full return to play, no issues there. The one in red is stage 2, so they're not even playing. They might be at practice to watch, but even at stage 2, we probably wouldn't encourage them to be at practice yet. The stage 6 is in yellow. They can practice, but they're non-contact. So that just kind of shows how that looks. That's one thing we'd really like to see. Especially there are some sports and some teams, the whole team comes through to see us. And I think we've only had one coach, have the app and have all the athletes and communicate with us. And it was a learning process, but yeah, it worked really well. It gave us updates, and yeah, it was really slick how it worked. So implementation, basically this is all free. I'm going to just list them all here. So a CCM program development manager can work with you to help if you are involved in a sport and on a board of the sport, doing a concussion policy, code of conduct, provide you with any educational resources you require. The concussion sideline course is free, and then that concussion tracker smartphone app too. So that's all zero cost to your organization. Now, the preseason, the baseline testing and post-injury management is located. So we're the local clinic for that. And then the costs for that just vary depending on what we're doing. And a lot of the costs are covered by health benefits. So anything we do in clinic is billed as physiotherapy. So if you have physiotherapy coverage, then it can be covered under your extended health benefits. So,
and most sports have.
Yeah. Actually. The other thing that's neat is most sports, like you're going to pay a membership fee to be in your sport, and that includes insurance. So we work a lot with Hockey Canada. We're going to be working a little bit more with Football Saskatchewan, I think. Yeah. So basically you would use your benefits, and anything that's not covered, they would pick up the cost. Sometimes there's a maximum, but every sport's a little bit different. So at the end of the day, it all should be covered. Other thing is, if we have any athletes that are registered with Kids Sport or Jumpstart that can't afford, we would just waive the fee on those. So by implementing a concussion protocol, you will maintain the integrity of the sport, limit liability. This is a big one. A lot of us volunteer. So, you know, there's a lot of decisions to be made. And if you can kind of pass on some of those medical clearance decisions to the medical practitioners, just limit your liability and just alleviate concern, protect the health of our children's brains, and potentially save lives. So just going to log out of this. Okay, how do I go back to my screen here?
Go back to share.
Oh, go back to Zoom. Oh, I'm here. No. Stop share. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, does anyone have any questions? You just have to unmute yourself and then just talk, and you'll come up on the screen. I guess one thing is there's a lot of really great resources out there. One podcast is called The Concussion Doc, and that's Dr. Cameron Marshall. And he has a lot of really great tidbits, and his podcasts are about 15 minutes and lots of just different topics about concussion. He's the founder of Complete Concussion Management, so he's done some really neat stuff. So that's one good thing that you guys can look at. I think I'm going to type in the log. Yeah, I'll type in the chat room. Maybe I'll get Alyssa to type that in. Okay. We'll just type in the login for the free sideline course, and then there's a promo code there that you can use just so it's at no cost. Yeah, Cameron Marshall. Yep. I'll type it in. So it's the concussion. We also have a really great resource. Oh, shit. It's what you need to know about concussions. It's another really great resource that we can send out to you guys if you want. So I guess, would we have emails from the Zoom call, Alyssa?
Yeah, we can also.
Yeah, so we can share that.
We can actually just attach it to on the chat.
Okay.
And everybody can download it.
Okay, so we'll attach it to the chat. I'll let you do that.
Okay.
So she's just typing in the information for the free sideline course. And that's a big thing that we're really trying to push. The more people that can take it and just understand and if you know someone, hey, you know, you're coaching hockey, you should just, it's an hour to 2 hours of your time just to kind of learn what to do in the situation, when to pull somebody. That's the hardest thing, is pulling. And for us to keep the athletes out of sport, I mean, it's breaks my heart some days that I have to tell kids, no, you're not playing tonight, or you're not playing this weekend. But it's only just, you know, to look out for their safety. And then, yeah, just put in the free promo code. And then she'll share our booklet there.
I have a question.
Oh, you just have to unmute yourself, I think.
On the bottom left hand.
Bottom left hand, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Here, I'll just.
Can hear you.
Yeah. Just need to unmute yourself. And then I can hear, oh, you're unmuted. Yeah, Jeanette?
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, I don't hear her. What's going on?
Maybe turn up your volume.
My volume is up.
Or Jeanette, turn up your volume.
I can hear Jeanette. This is Moira.
We can't hear her at all. What the heck?
I can't. I can hear Myra.
I heard Mara, but I didn't hear. Shoot.
Or maybe just chat in.
I'm typing it.
Oh, now now we can hear you.
Gotcha.
We can hear you now. I don't
Just
know.
when I started to typing it.
Okay.
So my question was, I'm a figure skating coach in Weyburn.
Okay.
And so I just wondered if you happen to know, I know you're in Estevan, right? If of anyone in Weyburn that I would be able to send skaters to if they get concussions.
Yeah, there's no one in Weyburn. The clinic there used to have somebody that did it, but they let their certification go. So yeah, we do see a lot of people from Weyburn, and for baselines, we're looking at if we have enough interest, like we come to Weyburn and we do a lot of group testing. So we'll try to have 2 streams of practitioners ready to go, and we see about 8 athletes an hour, but we have stations. So that's what we'll do for baselines if there's interest. But for treatment, yeah, unfortunately, we'd just be here. But the thing is, when it comes to return to play, a lot of times we see them for that initial assessment just to, you know, confirm symptoms, diagnosis, and screen everything. And then most of them only have to come back in for that treadmill test and then that exertion test. So it's usually just 3 appointments.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not.
Yeah, and I think my skaters would travel there. In past years, it probably would have been a good idea to even have baseline testing done. We don't have a lot of like competitive level skaters anymore here, but we've definitely had head injuries in the past. Skate Canada does have a concussion return to practice guideline. I am actually just going to look and see if it's been updated for this year, because I know it's been there in the past, but I'll be interested to see if it's got the new guidelines.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know too. I used to figure skate in Weyburn too. Get some balls.
Yeah, small world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll give you guys my email if you have any other questions you want to just send to me.
Hi, this is Moira.
Hi, Maura.
Hi there. I really, really appreciate this course and what you've put together, and thank you for making it available. I'm really hoping to get all of our football coaches taking that sideline course. Is it open to parents as well?
Anyone
Really?
can take it. Yeah.
So if I get the link and send it in an email to the whole group, they will then communicate with you to get connected to the Zoom meeting?
We can either just send I think this is recording right now. We can just send this out to everybody, or we can just do a Zoom call with a group too, if they have questions too. I could do a separate Zoom call for them.
Or whatever works best for you. Like, it's just
the sideline course is actually, it's a webinar. It's online.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, no. So it's
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, just an online course, yeah. That actually doesn't have anything to do with us. It's through CCMI. So they would just do it in their own time, yeah, whenever they can find 1 to 2 hours to do it. So yeah.
Okay.
Email it out to everybody. And
yeah, so yeah, we're not able, Alyssa's not able to share that file. So what we'll do is we'll maybe get everyone's emails If you want one, yeah, if you want a copy of the handbook, just maybe type in your email. We'll copy them all down and get them to you just through our, yeah, you can do that right after. Yeah, so if you want that concussion just information booklet, and that's a good booklet if parents have questions, it's a good booklet, just email it out to them. Coaches have questions. It just gives kind of the basics of what we talked about today, just in a really nice, easy to read format. So.
Well, I get lots of questions as a parent on the team because I'm a physio, and there's lots of times I don't know enough information about the circumstance to be very helpful, but just generally, and this is news to me that we're not commanding them to rest as much, so that's very cool. I see that I have quite a bit to learn still.
It's changing all the time. And the nice, like CCMI, they go through all the research every month, and they send us out all the abstracts and kind of, they summarize everything. So the nice thing is things change as the research supports it. So that's one of the neat things that, you know, it's always changing. I mean, we just did some recertification courses, and like I said, the protocol is just changing. So definitely keeping up with what's happening in research. And yeah, no rest. Yeah. Everything coming out now is like the earlier you get active, the better outcome you have, the quicker you're back to sport, back to school. So that is, I mean, it's all, we've always known that, but we didn't know like that early that we should get them active. So yeah, and it's, I think just this new protocol, because they can still have some symptoms as long as they progress stages when their symptoms don't get worse. We're going to have kids get back a little bit sooner, but we're doing all the screening. So, you know, I don't think it'll, I think safety wise we'll be fine. It's just exciting that things are, yeah, coming along.
I actually just had a concussion myself from playing soccer. And my family doctor was already really up on the concussion thing. I was very impressed that he was already telling me this activity within your symptom threshold thing. So it's nice to see that he's up to date, but I know not everyone is. But
yeah, no, and we try to educate in Estevan. Unfortunately, we have a lot of turnover of doctors. So, you know, you get them on board and then they leave and we have new ones coming in. So it's just a constant battle trying to maintain, I guess, even them knowing that we're here and what we do. And I think our goal is to have a few doctors in the city that really understand our process and our system. And they're kind of our go-to doctors, because unfortunately, most athletes that come in here don't have a family doctor. So we're really encouraging that they have somebody out there, because we want a doctor involved on the file. We want them to also provide clearance once we do all of our testing too. It's really important that the doctor is part of the team. So working on that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions, concerns?
How did you get started on this? Because this is just 100 hours of work. Just, I'm listening to you going, wow, just to start it. Like now, it sounds like things are fairly smoothly flowing and you get on your portal and you go look at it and track things. But when you started it, it would have been all just as brand new as can be.
Yeah, well, it's not my portal. I guess I've always worked in sports. Like I said, I was a figure skater growing up, played ball, and then coming out of physio school, I worked a lot with football and hockey. So, I mean, I saw concussions. Did I know exactly what to do with them back then? Not really. I guess based on what I learned in school, it was like resting. We did the SCAT 3s at that time. Wasn't really confident in return to play, and all the information out there was, I mean, I think we had the 7 return to play steps, but it just wasn't, I don't know, my confidence just wasn't there. So when I saw CCMI and what they were doing, I decided I'd just get more training. So the course itself through CCMI is about 40 hours, and you have to be a physio or a chiropractor or a medical doctor to take the practitioner course. So I just thought that's something I had to do. And I did that March 2016. So it's almost, I guess, 3.5 years I've been doing a lot of concussion work. And I mean, right now we're in the high season baseline testing period. And I mean, gosh, through hockey and football, we sometimes have 5 to 10 athletes in here like going through treatment. So it's busy. And every year, like, it's one of those things. Yeah, we weren't as busy at the beginning, and it's taken us a good 4 years just to really get going with it. Football has been on board for the past couple years. Hockey's been tough to crack, but we're making some headway there. So yeah, it's taken a while. But yeah, I mean, for us to, the nice thing about CCMI is they provide us with a lot of educational resources also. So like the presentations and things, they've got some slides we can use, and we just kind of cater it to the group that we speak with. So a lot of the legwork is done there for us. But yeah, it's been a long process. But I think we're finally gaining a lot of traction in the community, at least. And parents talk. I mean, that's probably how we've become so busy. I wouldn't say it's the organizations, the coaches. No, it's the parents. They talk. And I mean, last year we had tons of kids from east of here coming in for volleyball. Lots of volleyball concussions, which was just crazy to see, but really interesting. So just, yeah, word of mouth really has got us a lot busier. Yeah.
So I work in a hospital, St. Peter's Hospital in Melville, and I'm in an outpatient setting, and I'm the only therapist who's working there, and then there's a therapist who's working inpatients full time.
Okay.
So how much capacity do I need if I think that I want to do this in terms of being reasonable or realistic or whatever word to use?
We get the athletes in within 24 hours. So that's the one hurdle you might have. Like even if it happens on the weekend, we'll get them in on Monday. And then for the baselines, there's some equipment that you need to have. A JMAR grip strength. There's a force plate that we use for balance testing. And then that's about all for baselines. But for the return to play, yeah, we have a treadmill with a 15-degree incline and then a Monarch testing bike. So that's what you need just to do the baseline and then the treatment, the post-concussion. So, and I mean, we had most of that stuff already, so it wasn't too hard for us to get into it.
Thank you.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, you put it in twice.
I did, but I did to you privately, not to
Oh,
everybody.
okay.
So I just realized.
And
that.
then just the promo code.
Yeah.
So there's the coaches and trainers course. And it's good for teachers. Yeah, teachers, trainers, parents, executives, anyone. And there's the promo. Yeah, so that promo code will give you just the free access to it. Yeah. Any other questions?
So I'm clicking on it here in my browser. How do I save it? Oh, wait. I think I know how to do this. Hang on. Sorry, I'll mute and.
That's okay. So you've got my email there too. So I'm one of the physios that treats a lot of the concussions. Aaron is the other physio. So there's two of us that do most of the management of the file here. So yeah, any questions, concerns, just shoot me an email and I can hopefully answer them. And I'd be interested, yeah, Skate Canada, what is their protocol? I'm really curious. I might have to go look that up.
It's not updated. I looked. It's the most recent update is 2017. It's set, but it could work because it says the skater must seek medical attention. They will not be allowed to return to skate the same day. And then the final bullet is they must receive medical clearance by a concussion-trained healthcare professional before resuming on or off ice training. So
yeah,
if someone like you is the professional, they would follow the right steps, but it doesn't talk about, it definitely hasn't been updated for 2019.
Like for us, so to rule in a concussion, basically if the mechanism is there, which is either they have a direct contact to the head or a forceful whiplash, which I know both can happen in figure skating, and they have one symptom. So this, the booklet you're gonna get there's 22 symptoms they could have. If they have one symptom in the mechanism, we're ruling it a concussion. Now, I guess I just rule on the side of caution if a doctor just clears them a couple days later. I mean, and they're not, yeah, that's one thing that would be concerning. But I mean, that's something we're just gonna, you said that one of the doctors that you saw seemed to be up on it. So that's, and I think in Weyburn, we've worked with some Weyburn doctors too, and they've been pretty good. So yeah, okay. And basically like every 4 years, there's a huge concussion they call it like a consensus. They do a consensus statement. It's a big conference where all the top researchers go and they share their research and they develop new protocols. So, you know, there has been changes. The last one was just done in 2019, and that's where we had the 10-step. It actually changed to a 10-step return to play. So, and now, like I said, things are changing again where we're able to move between the different stages with some symptoms as long as we're monitoring and making sure they're not getting worse. But to get back to contact, they have to have no symptoms and they have to pass our exertional test. So, and it is a tough test, I'm telling you. We've had kids throw up on us. They obviously weren't ready. We've had kids, yeah, it's rough, it's tough. But if they can pass it and not have symptom provocation, then they can pass their baseline if we have it, then they're good to go. Yeah.
Have you heard anything about the Q collar?
I knew you were going to ask that. You know, there's not a lot of really great research on it yet. I mean, I think it's promising, but I mean, I think the premise behind it is like it's restricting the jugular vein, right? So it's what I've read on it, at least, and what I've heard on it, and Dr. Marshall, he did talk about it on one of his podcasts, was they're thinking that it's keeping the brain a little more buoyant, but they claim that it helps the brain structurally to prevent a concussion, and we know it's not a structural injury. So that's where I have a bit of a, I'm not sold on it, because it's not a structural injury, it's more of a functional injury, and they're claiming it's going to help the structure of the brain, which, yeah, I don't know. There's just not great research out yet on it. And I think the research that they have is they did the research, so it's not unbiased. So
yeah, I think the one thing that I had looked at was the test out of Harvard, and they were talking about it more in functional MRI, not so much the structural piece.
okay.
So it was something that, you're right, just trying to discern and figure out, is it just for sale, or is it something that actually has some kind of merit and reality to it? And so they were using functional MRI to assess the team that wore them compared to the band, compared to the team that didn't wear them. So yeah, we're just kind of monitoring and watching, and they're very careful not to say that you will not get a concussion. You can still get a concussion with anything. So they're not pitching it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, when I looked at it, looked promising. I guess just more studies need to be done, and there's a lot of things that they're looking at with like helmets and different force dispersions on those, and yeah,
like there's a lot of work in it, and quite frankly, there's just a lot of money in it right now.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit careful not to get sucked into something, chasing after whatever safety for your kid.
Well, that's the thing, right? We'll spend a lot of money on that stuff, and if it's going to help, for sure. But yeah, research there.
Yeah, we just decided that we easily crank out hundreds of dollars for all sorts of stuff. We would try it because it's not bad.
Yeah.
Don't know if it's good, but it's not bad.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well. You guys, like I said, if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email, or if you have, I think we'll record this and we can send it out if anyone else is just interested in the presentation, or if you've got a group of parents or an organization that's interested, we can go to meetings to do presentations, or we can do an easy, like a Zoom call like this. Went pretty slick, I think. Yeah,
I would be interested in receiving it. Yeah. I've got a few people who their kids have sustained concussions this year and last year, and so we're interested in that.
Yeah, and then just if you have any other questions, just contact me.
I have one more. Sorry.
That's fine.
Are you familiar at all with the NCCP course, Making Headway in Sport?
NCCP.
That's the National Coaching Certification Program. I'm just curious, the NCCP offers a concussion course. It's called Making Headway in Sport, but I haven't done it yet. I'm going to, and I just wasn't sure what the content is. So again, I'm not sure how up to date it is. It's the Coaching Association of Canada that does it, so I would hope it's fairly up to date. But
are they based out of Ontario, do you know, or they might, yeah, if they are, they hopefully will be.
Yes,
One of the
Ottawa, Ontario.
So
It might be. I'm gonna take it to it's free right now.
okay.
To see what the content is and if it's up to date and that kind of thing, because it could be that they've updated. I know it's been around for a while, so hopefully it's kept up to date, but I'm not sure at the moment. So I was curious if you happen to know.
In it, I'm not sure if it's much different than our content. So yeah, I'm curious.
Now, the more I know, the better.
Yeah, no, that's right. Never hurts to be more educated. So okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. And yeah, if you have, like I said, anyone else that you think should take the sideline course, pass on that information. We'll email out that handbook to you guys that we have your emails. Oh, they should be in your emails. So Alyssa's doing my admin stuff on the side here, so you should have that in your email. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming out, everyone, on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.